Some are saying it's the summer of Rick Pitino. Obviously, he's one of the most polarizing coaches in college basketball. And they recently had, I want to call it an open practice kind of situation, open practice, open scrimmage with massive media availability. And the folks, the Jeff Borzello shaped people of that coast of the country, flooded their way to St. John's to see this team. Saw some really great stuff from guys like Bryce Hopkins and all of them. But Rick Pitino also was firing off quotes left and right. And one of the ones that seemed to make its ways around the Twitter sphere, social media, was kind of slamming college basketball guard play, where he said there are no point guards anymore. Point guards are totally done. Point, point guard, there are no point guards anymore. Point guards are totally done. Look, I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt when they say things like this. They also have their reasons. He also went on to say some things as far as like, I mean, you look to the NBA and are there any point guards in the NBA anymore? And he brought up like Jalen Brunson. He's like, Jalen Brunson's not a point guard. He's looking to score, and it just a bunch of things like that. But I want to focus solely on this college basketball guard play thing where he says there are no point guards anymore. Point guards are totally done. I would just like to remind Coach Pitino that the possible National Player of the Year, Braden Smith, is still here. He's still playing. He averaged almost 9 assists a game last year. He is the consummate point guard. He's the best point guard in the country. So, Riley, I'll throw it to you first. I'll even ask you to play devil's advocate. Is he maybe a little bit right? Like, where you at with this quote?
Okay, so for one, I love that you hit on the notion of Patino giving quotes left and right. Obviously, we weren't doing this in Patino's heyday back in the 90s when he was at Kentucky. Uh, so to where I had to think for a second. Patino was at Kentucky in the 90s, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I don't need any historians jumping on me for this. We were
It's either
born in
that
the
or Louisville, one of them.
Yeah, both of us were born in the early 90s. Give us a break if it was in the 80s or something. But I'm pretty sure it was in maybe let's say 80s and 90s. Regardless, we weren't doing this back then to where I'm very curious, has he always been this quote machine or is this just since his reappearance back into the public eye following, his him being fired at Louisville where he's giving quotes throughout his St. John's tenure and this is the latest in a long line, but on one hand, I see how the archetype of that true point guard is sort of dead. The pass first who doesn't really score. I think of like a Scoop Jardine, a Kendall Marshall type. Maybe even I know Mateen Cleaves had some big scoring years in the late 90s, but that year in 2000 where Michigan State won the national title, he averaged 12 points a game, gave you 7 assists. Like that archetype you don't see a whole lot anymore. At the same time, to say a point guard is dead completely, this to me rings like a man who is disappointed in his roster. He's disappointed that out of the Ian Jackson, Josen Sanon, and Uzziah Sellers trio, that he probably doesn't trust any to run the offense right now. And I like all three of those guards. I'm a big believer in their talent, and I think eventually he will work it out to where I mean, they got a 2 seed last year with an offense that barely ranked inside the top 70 nationally. I think they should make some strides on that and should be way better shooting. And I trust him to figure it out, push the right buttons or whatever. But to me, this quote definitely has a little bit of that like I'm disappointed in my roster. I'm disappointed in some of my staff's evaluation that we don't really have an answer right now at the one.
Yeah, look, and looking at St. John's roster, right? Like the true point guard on their roster is probably Dylan Darling, which honestly, I feel like I might be one of the few guys that's in Dylan Darling hive. I actually really like his game, 6'1" transfer. I think that he could be a really good point guard option. But to Rick Pitino's point, I'll give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here, my dog Slick Rick. And also, by the way, the reason we didn't get these quotes back when he was coaching is because he's been coaching for so long. I feel like they sent his quotes out by Raven or Telegram, and like a couple people just didn't receive them to their hut or their house, so they weren't able to receive the message. But um, it, he has a team full of guys that he's trying to make point guards. They're not point guards. So, like to your point, I think his comment is more so reflected on the fact that he kind of is trying to make guys a point guard or like kind of make them have point guard duties and they're not true point guards. The point where he just loses it though is that you say in today's day and age when we're literally at the same time of this quote, Braden Smith is a person. I mean, I guess Are there any other like true? I mean, I was trying to do this exercise in my head, Riley. Like, are there any other true point guards that I'm just like completely whiffing on? Like,
In college?
yeah, I mean, like I think Jacoby Gillespie's a true point guard. I think that Bennett Sturts is a true point guard. Like, I don't
Rob Wright,
Rob Wright. Like, there's I just is this
Jaden
just wrong?
Bradley,
Is this
Elliot
just wrong?
Cadeau, like
Kylan
Mi-
Boswell. Like, what are we doing?
Milos Uzan. Like there's kind of a decent amount of examples.
Yeah, there's a decent amount of examples.
Even what he's saying about Jalen Brunson, like Brunson probably averaged what 5.5, 6 assists per game at Villanova, and it's not like he can't pass or run an offense. He
Right.
may he is in constant attack mode. He is their alpha, but you still think of Jalen Brunson as the primary initiator who knows how to get his teammates involved. He's just
Yeah.
going to be the one with the ball in his hands in crunch time and probably do some foul baiting that people hate and all that. But still, he is very much a point guard.
Yeah, also let's not forget what did Rick Pitino tweet when Ian Jackson committed to St. John's?
What did he tweet? Was it something about was there some slights at my coach thrown?
No, he said we had big shoes to fill at the point guard position. Kadari and Davion were awesome. The ball's now in the hands of our next great point guard. Let's go, Ian.
So this was 2 months ago. We went from
This was literally in April, the end of April.
Look, man, I don't want to make this about UNC. I have plenty of qualms with my program these days. I have plenty of critiques at the direction it is going. However, sometimes it's nice to see a little bit of vindication. And I loved watching Ian Jackson last year. He was probably my favorite player on UNC, and I want him to be successful. I want him to make the NBA. I think he is a ton of fun when he is on. This is objectively hilarious to go from big shoes to fill, our next great point guard, to point guards are dead
Yeah.
in 3 months.
And he also dropped the classic. Yeah, but I mean, they can pass, they can't shoot. And I'm just like, well, every point guard I just brought up can actually shoot the ball. So like,
Yeah,
it's just
right.
it was classic, and honestly, I appreciate it because we're getting graphics of this all across, like all across the Twitter sphere. And it's just like, yeah, everyone's just like, yeah, no, that just doesn't really fly. But I guess he really got out of it what he wants. Um, in more of a St. John's bubble, I guess you kind of brought this up. Is it going too far to take this as like concerning? Like, I feel like only a team that is having point guard struggle says this. If your
Right.
team has a point guard, you don't say this.
Yeah, I think it affects my view of them right now for sure. Long term, I wouldn't say I'm overly concerned because I didn't necessarily buy Ian Jackson or Joseph Santa as like true guys who you want initiating the offense every single possession, regardless. I think he's going to have to get creative. I've sort of believed that all along. And it's still early. I mean, it's August. They haven't even started official practices yet. It's just been whatever the NCAA limits are. I can't remember the exact number of hours they have during the summer. However, the reason why I would say there is at least a little bit of concern that should be taken seriously when you're looking at this St. John's team, when you're projecting how they will fare, defense almost certainly takes a step back. Even with Zuby back in the fold, even with Dylan Mitchell at the four, there is no clear Kadari or Aaron Scott replacements. Both of those guys were instrumental to their defensive success. I mean, Kadari was so good at getting steals and creating chaos with his length. I thought Scott could defend pretty much any position along the perimeter. And even if he got switched onto a four, you were cool with it because he had good size, understood how to use his body and his strength. There's no one in the backcourt who can do that. There's no one really on the wing who can do that. I don't know if Bryce Hopkins has a leap to make defensively, but you think about his time at Providence when he was, a Big East Player of the Year contender. It was almost entirely based on what he was doing on the offensive side. He's really skilled for his size, could facilitate a little bit, was a bucket getter. You weren't really hyping him up for his defense. And that to me is what's scary, where if you balance, the defense not being a top five unit, they probably still end up top 10, but not top five, not elite. Uh, Top 10 is near elite. Let's say not elite, or like contenders for best in the country. You're banking on a big leap on offense. And the fact that there are these concerns, and maybe some of these transfers you brought in aren't quite lighting it up like you hope they would. That to me is where I would at least have a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of panic in terms of, we've talked all offseason about this team's variance and the variety of outcomes that could transpire for them. Yeah, that's where I'm at a little bit is maybe they're closer to their floor than their ceiling at this moment.
Yeah, also Michael Brown. You know, Rick, I respect St. John's, and actually, it's funny that he's saying this, like, because meanwhile, like, I was seeing the clips from the St. John's like practice, and I'm like, they got some guys like Bryce Hopkins look really, really good. So you know, great on them to kind of make it this the talk of the town with what is going on. But yeah, I think it'll be something that'll be look. Riley, you and I, we obviously talk a lot of college basketball. We follow a lot of people in college basketball. If I had like a little aforementioned little toy button here that could be labeled point guard play, as far as how many times it's said during a college basketball season, it would be worn out to bits. So I'm sure that it'll be brought up more than a few times when we're watching St. John's this season. But I appreciate my dog Slick Rick for the quote, and we'll see what the point guard play ends up looking like this season for them.